Hello, my friends, hello, and welcome once again to stately Vaughan Manor, where Roger and I have returned for what would be my weekend reading report, but today it's my Friday reading report, because I'm going away for the weekend. I won't be around the next couple days, so I won't be able to do my weekend reading report, so going to do it now. Yeah, leaving for a couple days, Roger. I'm going to leave you here in charge. What could possibly go wrong with leaving Roger in charge? I think everything will be fine when I get back. So let's talk about all the stuff that I read during the past week. So if you've been watching this channel at all for any length of time, you know that I am on the 500 book challenge. The challenge where I have to read 500 books that I own. I've got a lot of books. I have to read 500 books that I own before I will buy any new ones. And I was keeping track of this on Goodreads, but I discovered that Goodreads is actually terrible at keeping track of what I've read, because it kept telling me I had read a different number of books every time I looked. So back to the old school way of keeping track. I'm just writing them all down. So let's go through the list. So at 107, book number 107, the 107th book that I have finished for this challenge, and the first book I finished this week was Warrior of Larn. Warrior of Larn. So last weekend was the Wasted Weekend, CriminOlly's Wasted Weekend, where you spend the weekend reading trashy books. And this is indeed a trashy book. It's got a fantastic cover, though, by Frank Frazetta. Great cover by Frank Frazetta for Warrior of Larn by Gardner F. Fox, the guy who wrote the original Justice League comics and about a billion other comic books. Very prolific, Gardner Fox. He also wrote a lot of paperback books, including this one, Warrior of Larn, which is basically an Edgar Rice Burroughs pastiche. It's Gardner Fox's version of John Carter of Mars, the Barsoom series. So Larn, our mighty hero, a mighty hero is transported mysteriously to Larn, the same way John Carter was transported to Mars. Only you get an explanation in this book, which, you know, is acceptable. It's an acceptable explanation. And there are an awful lot of things in this book that are very similar to Edgar Rice Burroughs' Mars. I mean, so much is like the Mars books. And it's written very, very much in Edgar Rice Burroughs' style. There are some differences, and the differences are the most interesting parts, I think, when Gardner Fox kind of uses his own ideas as opposed to recycled Burroughs ideas. But it's tremendously entertaining. It's just sort of, I think it'll be kind of forgettable, you know, just because the characters are not that interesting. They're just clones. They're Gardner Fox clones of John Carter and Deja Thoris and some other characters. The world building, if you can really call it that, was already built by Burroughs with some changes, but there are so many things in this that read exactly like from the Barsoom series. It's basically just pastiche, but it's entertaining. It's an entertaining one. Certainly a trashy book, and it was fun. And it was short, so, you know, how long was this? This was 160 pages. Now, there is at least one other Larn book that I'm aware of, but I don't have it. So the Larn saga is over for me, at least until I finish, you know, almost 400 books. And so that was number 107. Then I finished book 108, which is The Mighty Thor. This is the Thor Epic Collection, Volume 9, Even an Immortal Can Die. These are Thor stories from 1977 through 1979. I am reading every issue of Thor from the original run of Thor. And I'm at the point now where I'm in between Epic Collections. This is Epic Collection Volume 9. There is a Volume 11, but there's no Volume 10, because that's how Epic Collections are published, not in order. And so Volume 10, I don't think is going to be published until October, long after I'm done reading the issues. So I have to read the issues that follow this on my tablet, which is not as fun as reading them in this book. This book was really, really entertaining. We're into the Roy Thomas era of Thor, and it's a lot of fun, these stories. This volume starts off with Len Wein stories, and it starts off with some just great artwork by Walter Simonson. Walter Simonson, one of the greatest Thor artists of all time, did a run of Thor in the 1970s. Then he was replaced by John Buscema, who's incredible. And then we get Walter Simonson returns for a Thor annual, and that is fantastic. And at the end of this, there's this weird story that is illustrated by Wayne Boring, who was a classic Superman artist. I'm dropping my list. Don't drop your list. Who was a classic Superman artist, Wayne Boring. And unfortunately, he lives up to his name in this story. But then we get this cool Thor story from Marvel Preview. For a while, they had thought of putting Thor in their black and white line of magazines like they did for Conan, but they didn't get very far with it. So they published this Marvel Preview issue with a really cool black and white story of Thor from when Thor was younger, and he has this really badass adventure, and it is fantastic. It's just great. It's just great. Who does that story? I think Jim Starlin does the art in that one, and I think Len Wein does the story, but let me see. Yeah, Len Wein does the story, and Jim Starlin and Tony DiZuniga do the artwork. And it's great. So this was fun. This was great. I'm having a wonderful time with Thor. Magnificent comic book. So I think I'm reading Roy Thomas issues right now. And John Buscema has already left the book at the point I am now. And I think after Roy Thomas finishes up, the book kind of is less good for a long time. That's what I hear. But we'll see. I'm going to read them all. So that was book 108. Book 109, I just did a video on this a couple days ago. This is Conan, bound in black stone. This is from the new Titan Comics line of Conan. And like I said, I talked all about it a couple days ago. But the artwork, which looks exactly like John Buscema came back from the dead, which is a little weird. It's kind of like running into somebody, you know, it's like seeing Humphrey Bogart show up in a new movie. It's like, aren't you dead? But it's amazing, the artwork in this. It's just incredible. And it's a good comic book. It's a good comic book. I have high hopes for this comic. We'll see. And the artwork is by let me not get the name wrong, Roberto Della Torre. And Jim Zub writes the comic book. It's really good. I talked all about it a couple days ago. So Conan the Barbarian, bound in black stone. That was number 109. So then we get to a book 110, which is Brack the Barbarian. Brack the Barbarian. Fantastic Adventures of Brack in the Age of Blood. This was, of course, also for the Wasted Weekend. This is how I closed out the Wasted Weekend, was with Brack the Barbarian by John Jakes. John Jakes, who wrote the Kent Family Chronicles, The Bastard, and all those books in the Kent Family Chronicles. He also wrote the North and South trilogy of historical novels about the Civil War. And he was also a big fan of Robert E. Howard, and that inspired him to write a series of books about Brack the Barbarian. And these are very entertaining sword and sorcery stories. Brack the Barbarian is not Conan. He's a little hapless, frequently. he's easily fooled, gets himself into some terrible situations. It seems very frightened a lot of the times, and which is, understandable. He's up against some scary stuff, poor Brack. It's a lot of fun. These are fun sword and sorcery stories. They're not masterpieces of the genre, but they're a good time. Brack the Barbarian. They're actually better. These stories are better than I thought they might be. But good trashy fun for sure. And another Frank Frazetta cover there. Good old Brack. So there you go, Brack the Barbarian by John Jakes. That was fun. This is a fun book. If you ever see this lying around, pick it up. I think these are available as ebooks, but without the awesome cover, because ebooks never have awesome covers, hardly ever. So yeah, there you go. Okay, next. Book number 111, The Spider Wings of the Black Death. Wings of the Black Death. So this is a spider novel from the old Spider pulps. This is the third one, so it's an early spider novel. And it was written under the house name of Grant Stockbridge, but that was a pseudonym that they used for the spider pulp. There were a few different writers who wrote the Spider, but the guy who wrote the most Spider magazines, the most Spider novels, was Norvell Page. Norvell Page. And this is the first Spider novel written by Norvell Page. And he was great. I mean, he was just perfect at writing this kind of thing, because these novels are completely over the top. You wouldn't want to live in the Spider's world, because there was one catastrophe that killed billions of people every week or every month. It was a world of constant danger, and only the spider could save you. Which, considering how much trouble the spider had saving you, is a little troubling. The Spider was written and created as a response to the success of the Shadow magazine. But the Spider is almost, in a way, the opposite of the Shadow, where the Shadow is very mysterious. You don't know very much about the Shadow. He seems very capable. He always seems to be kind of in control. And even when he gets in real trouble, the Shadow is going to get out of it, because he's the Shadow. The Spider, however, he's not a cold, distant character like the Shadow is. Very emotional character. Richard Wentworth, which is your typical wealthy playboy type of guy who is obsessed with justice and also is kind of a homicidal maniac. Richard Wentworth is a very emotional character, he's very relatable if you can compare him to the Shadow. I mean, even though he's a psychopath who, kills, dozens of people every month in his quest for justice, you feel for this guy, because he has the hardest time being a masked adventurer. I mean, he's constantly injured. He's constantly captured. He barely escapes with his life every single adventure. The villains always get the drop on the Shadow, and the Spider, and he has to somehow get out of the situation he's in. And sometimes he's filled with great confidence, and other times he's filled with tremendous self-doubt. It's incredibly melodramatic, and it's just gripping. You just have to keep reading. You have to keep reading to find out how the adventure is going to turn out, how the Spider is going to barely survive. He's got a secret identity that pretty much everybody knows. Like, his best friend is the police commissioner. And the police, because the Spider is basically a murderer, as soon as they find out for sure that Wentworth is the Spider, they're going to arrest him. And his best friend is the commissioner. The commissioner's like, I have a strong suspicion that you are the Spider. And as soon as I find out, I'm going to have to arrest you, just so you know. But they're friends. And so it's an interesting, relationship. And he is in constant danger of arrest. it's just so much fun. And Nita Van Sloan is the love interest, right? Do I have that name correctly? I don't remember. I think it's Nita Van Sloan. I can't find the name now when I'm looking for it, but yeah, I think it's Nita. And she's a great character as well. She's not just the typical girlfriend of the superhero. She's actually more of a partner in a way. I mean, in this particular novel, when the Spider is up against an evil madman who is using the Black Death, the bubonic plague, to a new strain to kill a bunch of people and threaten the city. There's a point where the Spider, who's having a horrible time trying to defeat the villain, seems to be dead. It seems like he might have drowned and he's disappeared. And Nita takes over for the Spider. She just like, he's gone, I'm just going to take over and defeat the villain. So she pretty much becomes the Spider in the time that the, Wentworth is gone. And she's that kind of capable character, which is nice to see. And it's just so much fun. I cannot recommend this series highly enough. At least the stories that were written by Paige. It's great stuff. Anyway, I read that. It was amazing. And that was the last thing I finished. Right now, I'm reading this book. This is Thinner by Richard Bachman. It's actually Stephen King. Stephen King pretending to be Richard Bachman, but it's really written by Stephen King. And so far, this is good. I'm reading every Stephen King novel in the order that they were published. And I am at this one, Thinner, and I'm enjoying this very much. It has its issues, which I will talk all about when I finish the book. But so far, I'm really enjoying it. This is actually really good. Actually, better than I thought it was. Thought it would be better than I thought it would be. So I will let you know how that goes. I only received one thing in the mail this week, but it was a pretty awesome thing. Sometimes authors contact me and ask me if they could send me their book. And mostly I say no. Because I don't have a ton of time to read through a bunch of books. I've got so much else to read. So usually I'm like, I don't know when I'll get to this book. And, it could be sitting around here at the Manor for years. But this time I said yes, because this book sounds really, really good. This is Silk Road Centurion. This is by Scott Forbes Crawford. And this book sounds really cool. And so in 53 BC, Roman soldier Manius Titinius falls captive to a war band of Zyagnu nomadic horsemen who rule the seas of grass between the Gobi Desert and the mountains of heaven. His forced march to the east plunges him into a new world of wonder and peril. Manius has only his fighting spirit and the faith in Fortuna, goddess of luck, to aid him in a faraway land, China. So this sounds really cool. This sounds like my kind of thing. And I got it, and it's got a blurb on the back from Howard Andrew Jones, so it's probably good. It's probably really good. So yeah, Silk Road Centurion. I will definitely read this when I get the chance because it looks really cool. So thank you, Scott Forbes Crawford, for sending me this book. That looks really awesome. And I think that's everything. Okay, I have to get ready to go to work. And then out of town. I will catch you next time.